Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Dartmouth, Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to indicate, first of all, that I'll be splitting my time with the Member of Parliament from Parkdale High Park. Boy, I can't tell you anything that could be more clear than this debate right here, right now. We've got the Liberals have introduced this motion about how to further use workers' and employers' money. Just the same way the Conservatives have done, right? And the Liberals were on their feet a second ago talking about how this is all about creating jobs, and surely the NDP are in favour of that. Yes, we are. But out of general revenues, Mr. Speaker, out of general revenues that every taxpayer pays into. This fund, and I know the Liberals don't understand this, nor do the Conservatives, this fund is for unemployed workers. It's for paying benefits, and it's for supporting people through training and education. That's what it's for. Now, in the 90s and the early 2000s, the Liberal absconded with $54 billion, almost said 57, because that's the total, $54 billion of worker and employers' money and put it into general revenue. So I can understand they're a little confused now. Let's continue to do what we've done forever. Not only did they do that, Mr. Speaker, but they cut away at the eligibility requirements for EI, and the Conservatives kept doing the same thing to the point now where not only have they taken off the two of them with $57 billion worth of worker and employers' money, but now 36.8% of people who are unemployed are eligible. 67% of unemployed Canadians get denied. The fund is not there for them. So what's the answer? What's the answer? The answer by the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, is to cut premiums. To employers and to workers? No, just to employers. Because they've continued to run a surplus now. It's estimated to be another $3.5 billion. Have they thought about the fact that the people that are unemployed, the families that are unemployed in Atlantic Canada, or in downtown Toronto, or throughout this country, need the support, Mr. Speaker, because they're unemployed through no fault of their own? They don't think of that. Think about how can we make political hay out of the fact that we've allowed the surplus to accumulate. That's what they're doing. And what have the Liberals done? What have the MPs from Prince Edward Island done? Have they stood up and they said, don't touch that money, that's for workers, that's for employers, that's money they've paid into to make sure that when people are unemployed, they've got some support, because in Prince Edward Island, we have a high level of unemployment in our seasonal industries, and those people deserve some support. No, they don't do that. It's the same thing as the MPs and Liberal MPs in Nova Scotia and across the country. They think we can do better than what the Conservatives have done. The Conservatives are estimating to take $550 million out of the EI fund as a result of the scheme that they've come up with. Now, the Liberals, with their proposal, of course, they've suggested it's only going to be $275 million. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? They screwed that up, too. They messed up with their calculations. You know, nobody's surprised at that whatsoever. You know what it's going to cost? You know what they forgot to do? They based their calculation on net employment rather than gross employment, Mr. Speaker. And what's the difference? $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion. The members over here, Mr. Speaker, are making a proposal that is going to take $1.5 billion more out of the EI fund, and they say, why wouldn't we support that? Well, let me tell you something. In 2011, we came up with the small business hiring tax credit proposal. In other words, if small businesses created jobs and they could prove that they created new jobs, then they would get a tax credit. They would get money back from that. Straight up, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives, the people of Canada thought this was a good idea. Businesses thought this was a good idea. And so the Conservatives decided to take it on, and they introduced it. But they only kept it going for 2 years. I don't understand why they did that. And I would suggest to you that they've been under some fire. So instead of messing around with their supposed balanced budget that they've talked about as a result of cutting hundreds of millions of dollars out of services to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, including seniors and scientists and people on disability, veterans. What they've decided to do is they've decided to come up with a new tax credit. And where are they getting the money? They're digging into the pockets of working people. That's what they're doing, Mr. Speaker. They're digging. They got their hand right down in, and they're ripping out that money. Because not only is it unfair, and there's no tie, there's no links whatsoever to job creation. They just hope. They just hope. They're going to sprinkle a little bit of dust down here, and they just hope that some jobs pop out of that. They have no way of control. There's no linkage whatsoever. Not only is that the case, but increasingly they're shifting responsibility for paying for this. The responsibility for paying for this is not employers. It's not on other people, other businesses or whatever. It's on working people who pay into the EI fund, Mr. Speaker. How can that be fair? How can that be fair, Mr. Speaker, in this day and age? If the government was committed to the idea, and they should be, they saw it worked, providing a tax credit to businesses for creating jobs, then they should come forward with that kind of a proposal. We'd support it. We came up with the idea in the first place. Of course we'd support it. We thought it was a good idea when they brought it in before. We thought it was a bad idea when they took it away. We think this is the wrong way to go. Mr. Speaker, this is the wrong way to go. Doesn't help the unemployed. You know what we're talking about in terms of those people, those 37% of unemployed Canadians that do get unemployment insurance or employment insurance benefits, Mr. Speaker. What are we talking about? What kind of money are we talking about? We're talking about $395 a week. That's what we're talking about. That's the average payout under EI. And under this government, Mr. Speaker, not only are the number of people that are receiving that money going down, but that amount is increasingly going down. And what makes me so upset, I got to tell you this, what makes me so upset is that Atlantic Canada, where the seasonal industries play an important role in our economy. This government brought about changes to eligibility requirements that has affected communities throughout Atlantic Canada. And when they did that, I was upset about it, and my colleagues in Atlantic Canada and Quebec talked about how this was a problem. Members of the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker, spoke to their constituents and others in Atlantic Canada about what a problem that was. And now here's an opportunity to speak clearly about the fact that what the government is doing is wrong. It doesn't deal with an EI fund. It doesn't deal with criteria. It doesn't deal with eligibility. It doesn't deal with the amount that unemployed workers are going to receive. It doesn't deal with the problems that small businesses and seasonal industries are experiencing as a result of people not being there, and they have to keep training them. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't deal with that whatsoever. What they've done with this proposal is they've tried to out-conservative the Conservative Party. Take the bad math out of it. They tried to out-conservative the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, abandoning unemployed workers, abandoning workers in this country. And that is shameful, and it's something that I'm certainly going to spend some time talking to people about from one end of this country to the other. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question come on tide. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I get this sense that when this motion ultimately comes to a vote, that there should be a number of New Democratic members of Parliament that should be somewhat embarrassed. Let's put it very simple for all members to really get appreciation in terms of what was said back in 2011. This is when we had Jack Layton as the leader of the New Democratic Party. Just so that members are aware of this. Employers will receive a one-year rebate on the employer contributions for the Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance premiums for each new employee hired.
It's a different party now.
Mr. Speaker, this is a different New Democratic Party that we're hearing here today. It's not the Jack Layton Party of 2011.
That's right.
Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I challenge the member to be straightforward and tell us what has changed since 2011, other than the leadership, to cause the New Democrats not to support what is a good idea that is going to generate tens of thousands of jobs from coast to coast here in Canada. We know that this is a job creation proposal that's before us today. At one time, the New Democrats used to support this idea. What has changed?
This may be an opportune time to remind all members of the House that questions are supposed to be about a minute long, no longer, and they consistently have been running a minute and a half to 2 minutes. The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know what? I appreciate the question. I appreciate the member from Winnipeg North, you know, who himself is in a situation where his party continues to change with the prevailing winds. You know, that's it, right? It's like the Liberal Party. They campaign on the left and they govern on the right. They always have, they always will. So therefore, they never really know what they stand for because it changes. It changes at any given time. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that what the NDP stands for is it stands for supporting working people in this province, in this country, stands for supporting small business people and making sure that the EI fund is used for what it's supposed to be used for. And that is providing unemployment insurance benefits, and that's making sure that workers are there when they're needed by employers, and it makes sure that people are supported between their opportunities of having employment. That's what the New Democratic Party stands for and always will stand for.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I listened to my colleague very carefully. I just happened to be looking on a website here for Dartmouth Cole Harbour for some of the job listings. I see they're wanting a receptionist, there's a customer service specialist, a shipper, receiver, a dispatch coordinator, Dartmouth Crossing customer service representative, a member care coordinator. So there are jobs that are being created in Dartmouth Cole Harbour. In fact, this website says there's about 4,000 jobs. But would he not want to see the opportunity for more small businesses in his constituency be able to offer more jobs to young people to get experience, to people who are looking for work to come back into the workforce?
The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour. You have about a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there's nothing more than we want is for people to have an opportunity to work if they are able, to be able to find jobs and family-sustaining jobs, Mr. Speaker. This government, of course, has got a terrible record in terms of creating jobs. They've worked with Canada Post to make sure that another 8,000 family-sustaining jobs are going to be lost in this country. And let me tell you, the small, medium, and large businesses in Dartmouth Cole Harbour don't need this. They're creating jobs and creating opportunities, creating economic development, Mr. Speaker, despite this government. Despite this government. We're working closely with them to make sure that they continue to do that. But I'll tell you this, the number of people that come into my office, they're unemployed through no fault of their own, and they have to wait 40 days, upwards of 40 days, to even get an answer from Service Canada about their claims. That's wrong, Mr. Speaker, and this government should be ashamed of treating unemployed workers that way.
Order à l'ordre conformément à l'article 38 du règlement.